Hey YouTubers, back to Eden Growers. It's East of Eden Grower Creedmoor Fury coming to you from my kitchen place. And it's been a few weeks since I produced a video because we've been really busy at the farm. Got a lot of new things coming down the pipeline. We're even using Starlink now to upload our videos and to do internet stuff. So we're really excited about what's coming in our future. Today, I'm actually going to cover something that's, well, to me it's interesting, and to you there may be some great benefit to this. I'm going to cover the concept, the ideas of making your own organic butter. Okay? Stick with me, we're going to talk about organic butter. We're also going to talk about something else that comes from the making of organic butter, and that's organic buttermilk. And something that not that long ago I learned about when it comes to buttermilk is buttermilk has lots of lactic acid bacteria. And this is a great bacteria to collect for use in your gardens. I'm going to show you all how I do that. All right, folks, so it's Sunday, and I've got a whole bunch of things gathered in front of me. Y'all probably already noticed the little red cup right here. It's not a red cup, it's clear, but it's got red stuff in it. Because it's Sunday and it's already afternoon, Creedmoor's having himself a nice little drink. Okay, his honey's having a nice little drink too. So, you know, let's be real about this. Anyway, we're about to make butter. Butter is kind of fun. It's cool to make. I really like it because you get better butter than you can get in the store. Okay. All right, so what do I mean by better butter than the butter that you can get in the store? Well, I don't know if you checked, but the butter that you get from the store, unless it says specifically that it's organic, it's probably not organic. And there's such a tremendous disparity between organic and inorganic when it comes to, you know, the classifications within the food groups. This right here is organic heavy cream, heavy whipping cream, and it costs more money than the regular stuff does. Probably because it costs more money to manage and raise organic cows and then extract organic cream from them and then ship organic cream in a world where everybody doesn't do organic. So in any event, you know, we found these guys right here at a store that's not too far from us. We found that it makes delicious tasting butter. If you guys know of someone who has organic cows and an organic dairy nearby, you may get a better option than I get. But this works great for us. So for all intents and purposes, you can go out and you can get some of this stuff. Each one of these right here is a pint, and I'm going to utilize both of these in one 2-quart mason jar. Okay? I've got this right here that we use when we separate the buttermilk, because I'm going to actually collect the buttermilk and put it back in this 2-quart mason jar for storage and use later on. We won't be eating or baking or doing anything with the buttermilk. We'll be using it in the gardens. This right here, I'm going to get to a point where I'm going to do a wash, the butter wash, and I'm going to wash essentially the butter with clear water until the water turns clear again. Then we know the butter is ready to store. I've got some salt right here. We like to use this salt right here, Celtic sea salt. It's pretty pure, it's good stuff. We like the way it tastes, and that's what we're going to be using today. So for these two guys right here, we're going to use 1/2 of a teaspoon of this Celtic sea salt. Got these 4 containers right here. You can probably see them. This is what we're going to store it in. You can actually freeze your butter. You can store it in the fridge. We do store it in a fridge, but sometimes we store it in a larger container, or we'll freeze it in a larger container, and then we can use it later on. But in this particular case, for today, we're going to use these guys right here because they work really, really well. I've got some filtered Brita water here. I'm sure that there are other filter manufacturers out there that make an equal quality water for these types of things. Feel free to explore the world of filtered water. If you don't have filtered water, you can very easily use distilled water because that's going to be pure as well. It's also pH neutral. So these are the articles that we need to make all of this stuff. And I'm going to be making with no gloves because I'm not going to be touching the butter. Yeah, not really interested in touching the butter because when you get your hands all up in the butter, it's kind of greasy and slimy, and I'm not really interested in doing that. So, you know, let's take the gloves off. All right, so step 1 is always going to be to clean yourself and clean your stuff up. We cleaned the work surface, washed my hands really, really well in the sink over there. We cleaned this out, and we did our best to dry it out completely. And we're at that point now where, you know, everything is safe. We dried the outside of it. We're not going to drop anything. All this stuff is clean. These things right here, they're really, really tight and hard to open. So I went ahead and I opened them ahead of time. I'm just going to basically take one and pour it in. See? No photography tricks at all. I'm going to put that goodness in there. Some people will suggest to let this stuff sit out and age for a little while. Some people will suggest that if you do let it sit out, then it's going to warm up and it makes the process a little more difficult. These came right out of the fridge moments ago. I like to do it when it's a little cool. Okay. So now that we've got our heavy cream in the container, we'll use this. Okay. And this was washed ahead of time. It's been cleaned. I'm not going to stick my fingers in there. All we're going to do is go ahead and put it on. Get some of this stuff out of the way so Creamore doesn't make a mess. And this is where it gets super technical. It's super tricky. You can use your kids for stuff like this if you want to. I remember as a young'un, I made some butter too, but never made butter as good as this. And this is it. The whole routine is basically to just shake it like this. I'm in a squeaky chair. I'll probably stand up. Squeaky chair. I'll lean against this, give myself some balance. And believe it or not, this is really kind of fulfilling, because once you start to see the butter change, once you start to see it go from cream to butter, and it doesn't take very long. And I'll get to that point where you can see a little bit of it. We're doing a little shaky, shaky, shaky. And as it starts to glob up, I'll stop and show you. There it goes. Switching. Y'all will see it start to clear up here as the butter starts to gather itself. Y'all see that? Okay. Some people will choose to put the salt in right now, and the salt actually starts to work some of the buttermilk out of the butter. It helps it to separate. At some point, what's going to happen is there's going to be a big old clot of butter in here in the middle, and there'll be liquid buttermilk surrounding it. That's what I want to skim off. That's the consistency we're looking at right now. The color hasn't changed yet. It'll start to change a little more yellow as we continue on. But it already tastes delicious. I must have got some really good cream because there's not a whole lot of buttermilk in it yet. But it'll come. You're just really working against the clock. And there we've just switched. Hopefully y'all can see that. We just switched. The buttermilk will begin to separate now. You'll see that it'll form a little cloudy white coating on the inside. I love this stuff, folks. It keeps me young. It really does. Not only that, it's so much healthier. We're starting with something organic, and we're hoping to keep it organic. That's what this effort is all about. It may not be perfect, but I can promise you it's heading in the right direction. So let's keep going on this. The byproduct of this process, being buttermilk itself, is great for, especially for growers that are starting out. They're developing a new growing zone that might have never had vegetable crops growing in it before. I think we're about to drain off some buttermilk. I'll show you all how it's starting to sort of glob up in there. I don't want to turn it too much because the buttermilk will pour out. Now all I'm going to do is just gently pour some of this buttermilk in there without letting any of the butter out. That's basically pure buttermilk right there. As pure as you can get from a pint of it that you bought at the store. I'm going to do that a little more because I really want to firm this up a little bit before we start clearing it out with a little bit of clear water. And you'll see it'll really start to amass pretty well. And the turning inside this container is actually going to force more buttermilk out of it. We'll wipe it off over here because I don't want the jar to get slippery. If it gets slippery, even a little bit slippery, it could fall out of my hand, collide with one of these things. And here I can show y'all about how much buttermilk is in there. It's full of lactic acid bacteria. And here's our butter. So let's turn it some more. And this sort of sloshing back and forth in here, inside this semi-wet jar, forces the butter to compress against itself, which pushes more of the buttermilk out. It tends to firm the butter. And while that was a pretty good workout, doing 2 quarts at once or 2 pints at once, it's not that bad. If you don't want as much of a workout as Creedmoor is used to getting, just go ahead and do this in a 1 quart jar with 1 single pint. And then instead of using ½ a teaspoon of salt, you'll use ¼ teaspoon of salt. Over time, you can learn to season it and flavor it yourself, utilizing what you like, what your flavor palette will work with, and I think you're going to get some really great results. There we go. Now we pushed a bit more buttermilk out. And this stuff is so valuable to me. It really is. It's as valuable to me as the butter itself. There we go. Okay, so we're going to do it one more time. Just kind of get that balanced. And then I'm going to do this one last time before I salt it. Okay, so we're just looking to reduce that down sufficiently. You can kind of tell, the butter tells you when it's ready. Okay, now I'm going to show you what that looks like. Okay, I'm going to actually put a little tiny bit of filtered water in here, not a whole lot. Now we're going to begin the rinse process, just a tiny bit, not a whole lot, not yet. I really just want to clean off the outside of the butter before I salt it. So what's the meaning of all this? Well, I don't want the salt and the lactic acid bacteria in here. So I'm essentially doing all of this before I use the salt to dry the last bit of buttermilk out of the butter, and because the salt is going to actually act as a preservative and a flavor enhancer. Yeah, you know, again, my wife is so good at reminding me that the more buttermilk that you leave in here, the faster your butter is going to essentially become not shelf stable. If you leave a lot of buttermilk in there, you're also leaving a lot of lactic acid bacteria in there, and eventually, you know, they're going to consolidate their terms and they're going to start to chew on things and multiply at rates that you're not comfortable with. So we do want to do this. And now, got some pretty good and yellow looking butter forming. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do my best, even though I've got a little bit of blood flowing in me, to drop this in with a tiny bit of water. That's going to help that butter to mix in with the salt a little better. And we're going to go ahead and get it mixed thoroughly. And what's going to happen now is the butter is going to fold over and over and over again several times through this. And once I get it mixed into the butter, I'm going to let this sit by itself for like 2 or 3 minutes. Don't worry, I won't force y'all to watch me for 2 or 3 minutes while we sit here staring at the walls. But this step right here, it's important that you get the salt and the butter mixed together because it's a preservation agent. Okay, now that we know we've got it mixed in there pretty well, I'm just going to let it sit just like this while we take a pause. Be right back. All right, so here we go. We've been here sitting, chilling out, you know, hanging out, having a conversation for about 5 minutes. It's pretty well set in, and now I'm going to go ahead and just start pushing this thing around a little bit. You can hear that blob of butter in there just kind of bang around. And that's really all we're looking to do, is get a little more shake on. Force the last little bit of buttermilk out. And if y'all have other purposes for your buttermilk and having salt in your buttermilk isn't a problem, you can go right ahead and continue to add this portion of buttermilk to the first portion of buttermilk, and then that can go, you know, wherever you want it to go. Because I'm going to be using this buttermilk to sort of extract the lactic acid bacteria from it, I'm not going to be introducing those salts into it. I want it to be salt-free. If I need to add salt at any other time, I'll add it later in the system. And to be clear on that, to sort of evolve that thought process a little bit more, I'm not in a saline environment. There aren't salts all over the place here, so my plants aren't necessarily accustomed to being fed salts. So when it's necessary, if it's necessary, I can make that adjustment later on. But for now, just want it in the butter. This part actually goes pretty quick because you just got to get the salt into it. And then once you do, that salt is going to start to work that liquid out. And it won't be nearly as much as what we put into here. Okay, so that was really only a couple of minutes. The butter looks and smells wonderful. It even has that sort of lightly salted smell to it now. And we're going to start clearing it off. Y'all can see that that buttermilk is still white. So that means there's still a lot of it in there. I'm going to go right back to our filtered water, distilled water, you know, whatever you got. The butter is already now pretty kind of, you know, oily in consistency. Oh, it smells so good. Let's see if we get anything out of it. A little tiny bit. So far, there's what our ball of butter looks like. We're going to rinse one more time. Just because we kind of know from experience from doing this, you lose a little bit of salt in this process, it's going to be in there. We become accustomed to adding a tiny bit back, so just a little bit more than a pinch on one of your last rinses, and then you'll leave a larger portion of the flavoring salts in place for you. If you don't like salt, don't use it.
Use the butter faster.
You just got to use the butter sooner. How much sooner? I would say this amount you probably want to use inside of 2 weeks. But because we've salted it, it's going to last. Oh, it's going to last longer than it's going to take for us to eat it. We like butter. Did a pretty thorough job. It looks fantastic. Y'all going to see what it looks like on the... There we go. Just about clear. So this is that point where I'm like saying, hey, again, a little bit of lactic acid bacteria in my stuff is not a problem. I'd rather have this than PFAS or PFOS. I'd rather have this than wax. I'd rather have this than anything else because this tastes amazing. When you start seasoning your butter with some of the herbs you have, it's going to open up a world of butter to you that you never thought existed before. And God bless, because it's so good. So, I'm going to give it a little bit of air. Check to make sure that we don't see a whole lot more. And I'm going to talk about a couple of keynotes. In particular, I'm using cold water. I'm using cold cream. Everything I'm using is cold. I'm using a larger bottle because it keeps the warming effects of my hand away from the butter. And the final step is going to be to put this in jars, in containers. And once we get it into jars and containers, we can start to put it back in the freezer or the refrigerator. And it's going to become that consistency of butter that everybody is so used to seeing. It's just wonderful, folks. If you get a chance to make this stuff up, do yourself a favor. Make this stuff up. It's wonderful. There's literally no liquid coming out of it now. Once you get to that point where there's no liquid coming out of it, you're going to be pretty well washed out. And that liquid that comes out is clear. This is where we stop. Okay, so now I'm going to basically roll it into something that's small enough to fit out the end. And we're going to put it in jars. Good. And every bit of it comes out, except for this little bit right here that I'm going to take out with my hand and put it in my pie hole. So the last step, what we do is we sort of spread it out here for a few minutes, just a little bit, onto this glass jar. Just a little. And allow any of the moisture that's in it to drip out. Okay? It's kind of important that we do this. This step is going to really help it to last a lot longer. I'm doing my best to keep my fingers out of the business end of this if I can. But just sort of spreading it around on this pre-washed glass bowl. And pretty much the remainder of the liquids are going to come out. And if I could show you the remainder of these liquids, they're really, really clear. I don't know. There's just something so satisfying about doing this, and if you teach your children to do it, my kids do this. But you know, they've evolved their own methods, so I think that's kind of cool. I'm really, really proud of them for that. You know, they do things that work within their time frame and in ways that are useful for them, that they can manage. They've operationalized their own systems according to their own needs and desires, and I don't ever knock anyone for that, you know. Y'all may do things different than Primo Fury, and that's fine if you do. I'm sure most of you do. I mean, look at me, you know. I make my beds, my garden beds, really, really deep. Everybody doesn't do that. I just like it that way. Works well for me over the hard red clay. So there we have it. A little bit of that liquid is already pushed out. And, you know, you can kind of keep that healed in. Drip it out. You know, you can kind of put maybe even something over the top of it and keep it clean and keep it pure. But, you know, I just like to hang out with it and do a little bit of this kneading, and it's going to start to come out. You'll also notice that as it gets colder, if you put it in the refrigerator pretty quickly, there may be a little bit of liquid that ends up inside your container. So always leave some space. And if a little bit of liquid ends up in your container, you can just pour it off. It's basically just water with a little salt in it. So, you know, it's preservation. So you'll be fine with it either way. And like I'm going to show you one more time. Time is your friend. So this sort of little sloped effect that you can see there is very helpful. It allows everything to sort of drip down. And, you know, you can go away, you can do other things for a couple minutes. Usually I allow this to go for 5 minutes. I'm not sitting here talking about it. But it's pretty safe right now, and it's so delicious. I'll speed up as much of this stuff as I can so y'all aren't bored to death. But it's pretty much ready to go into jars right now. I mean, it's not going to improve that much more. And, you know, it's a toss-up between leaving it out here, out in the open for an extended period of time, and then you run the risk of other things getting in there and contaminating it. That's not something I'm interested in doing. But you can check these out. They're pretty cool. I'm not sure where you find them. But
Anchor hopping.
I'm sure if you look online, you can come up with something. Look at that. Isn't that wonderful? The texture, the color, it's beautiful. It's got stick, staying power. I love it. So one more word of thanks. Those of you that have joined Creedmoor Fury and his family on this particular journey. Thank you for being a part of my journey. Thank you for scribing. Thank you for writing to me. Thank you for scribing to me when you do. Thank you for subscribing to me when you do. Thank you for, well, everything that you've done to be a part of this journey. Without y'all, I mean, I just wouldn't be able to do it without you. The amount of butter that you get out of each batch will vary a little bit. And using these glass jars is kind of nice because you can still continue to strain some of the water off. Just keep pressing it into place. And I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do here in a minute. Even though it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I'm fixing to make me some breakfast with this. It's just that good. And there's just a little bit more to go in a third container. You're going to get different yields based on what type of cream you use. If the cream has more fats in it, I think typically you're going to get more butter out of that. If it has less fats in it, you might not get as much. So, there you have it, okay? This is where I remind everybody, you stuck with me this far, I made this much sense for you. You know, we're doing all kinds of great stuff together as long-distance gardening partners. Please, select the thummy thing, click it so that it points up, select the subscribe thing, and also share. If you can share it with someone else who might be interested in things like this, delicious, organic, homemade butter that y'all watched me make right here, and I'm looking at the clock right now. It probably didn't take much more than 30 to 45 minutes from start to finish. If I wasn't shooting video, it would have gone a whole lot faster. But peace, love, may God be with you, and forever stay organic or above organic, folks. Okay, check it out. So here I go straining off the last bit of buttermilk. We made butter, and what I want to do is I want to make sure that I've got all of the buttermilk essentially strained through this piece of cotton and into this glass jar. A nice wash, clean piece of cotton. And we're just going to squeeze the last bit of buttermilk out into this jar. And I'm going to multiply these things. There's not enough in here. I want a greater concentration of lactic acid bacteria. So I'm going to add a small amount of distilled water to this. I'm going to add a tiny, tiny amount of a low sulfur blackstrap molasses right to it. And there you go. Nice pure buttermilk. It doesn't have the butter fat in it, because if I make it with the butter fat in it, then what's going to end up happening is it's going to, when I apply this by my pressure sprayers, that equipment is going to get really slimy inside, and it could harbor some pretty bad stuff. So we like to start with it just like this. And then clean up your mess, folks.